Welcome, everybody. I'm so grateful that you have selected to spend your evening with us here with Wise Wellness Guild, with Paycor, and with our expert panel, where we will be speaking about mental health and PTSD, and all things discussing reducing stigma and managing symptoms during this really unique time of transition in our lives. And I am really just incredibly grateful for you taking the opportunity to invest in yourselves as well, either as those you're curious about mental health and you're curious about learning more, or curious about how you can support the communities around you as they look to invest in their mental health. A little bit of just background on, I will go ahead and share my screen, about Wise Wellness Guild. We are a community dedicated to the advancement of women through whole self wellness. So we are beyond just working out and smoothies and eating salads. We are really interested in looking at enhancing women in peak performance through all aspects of wellness. So occupational wellness, mental wellness, enhancing financial literacy. We really aim to try to meet women where they are and support them with an empowering community that can really encourage one another to invest in ourselves, so we can support those who we interact with on a daily basis. And we are an abundance for people. And this topic is just incredibly close to my heart, because I feel as though women, as we face mental health challenges, the stigma and the societal pressures tell us that it's not until we reach burnout that we're allowed to invest in ourselves. And that's really what we're trying to change. That it's okay to not be okay, and that sometimes we have to take a step back and really look at ourselves as human instead of, well, we are superhuman, but we are human. And the way that we approach our mental health is incredibly crucial. This experience today is something that we started talking about actually before the holidays. And it's so interesting how, as the universe has shifted and all of our worlds have shifted, how it's really become even more important and at the forefront of our conversation, because those that maybe were starting to take the step towards investing in their health and wellness became, I guess, they became kind of halted in a moment of survival. And as we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's about, safety, security, about just trying to understand what tomorrow is going to look like. And those of us that were already experiencing survival on a daily basis, all of that has become heightened as of more recent. And I, in speaking with different members of this expert panel, I always say that this is one of the most proud moments of my entire career, of being able to bring something like this to our communities. And we've got people joining from all over the country tonight. And I'm just really honored, because we're starting a movement of just being able to be open and have conversation and starting to just break down the barriers of us being able to invest in ourselves. And so I wanted to start by just sharing a little bit of a video of Wise Wellness Guild, and then we will move on with the program. But for those of you that have not heard about Wise, I thought it was important for you to understand a little bit more of the background.
What if we could advance women in leadership roles simply by prioritizing their wellness? What if we could improve our economy by simply taking care of those who care for us, the physicians, the brand builders, the stay-at-home mothers? I'm Stevie Carr, founder and CEO of Wise Wellness Guild, a community dedicated to the advancement of women through whole self wellness. When my husband and I were making the decision to adopt a child, I found myself at a crossroads. Could I still rise to becoming a CEO in my career and a CEO at home? And after years of deprioritizing my own health and wellness, I was burnt out and I wasn't alone. Research proves that women work 39 more days per year due to household duties. I've partnered with physicians and experts to understand how women can achieve peak performance in all aspects of life, avoiding burnout for a more fulfilling future.
I am courageous.
I am a force.
I am victorious.
I am well.
I am wise.
And so as we think about Wise Wellness Guild, my background is in consumer packaged goods. I'm a designer by trade, and that's how I grew up. I'm a creative who is seeking to solve problems through understanding the human condition, and at the core and the forefront of all of our minds of how we exist in this world amongst groups and communities. And from 10 years of P&G, moved into working at UC Health for a few years, and then embarked on my journey of starting Wise Wellness Guild. And so today is really about just having the right conversation amongst ourselves and thinking more holistically about how Wise Wellness Guild can really provide meaningful solutions for you. Like I said, we can revisit this later because this is not the reason why we are here, but if you are interested, you can go to our website to find out more. It's, membership starts at $6. And I would love the opportunity to share the stage with our amazing partners at Paycor. As I was thinking about who would be an incredible partner to walk this journey with, and a platform that really embodies what Wise Wellness Guild is trying to create, Paycor has always been at the forefront of companies who are leading equity in the workforce. And as I learned more about their mental health group that they have started, MAP, that's where I've just continued to be amazed at what companies can do to invest in not only the people that they work for them, but with their communities. And so, Devin and Brad, I'm not sure if you want to speak a little bit to your involvement and what you guys are doing on your end. Let's see. Are you muted? I want to make sure that you are unmute. There we go, Brad.
Hey.
And Devin. Okay, perfect. And then let me find Devin here. Okay. Devin, I'm asking you to unmute. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll go ahead and get started, Stevie, on that. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Paycor, Paycor is a company that provides comprehensive HCM solutions and payroll software services. We're located here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We've been here since the company was started 30 years ago. And we provide payroll services to clients all across the United States. Paycor operates based on 6 guiding principles, one of which is take care of each other. And during my time here at Paycor, I've seen this to be true time and time again. And I believe one of the biggest ways that we do that as a company is through our employee resource groups. So WIN, our Women's Inspiration Network, and then MAP, as Stevie had mentioned, is our mental health awareness project. We're just so excited and proud to be able to partner with you, Stevie, and with WISE for this webinar, hosting this amazing panel of women today, because we align a lot with what WISE stands for, right? So, you know, WIN is really striving to connect and inspire and impact women by fostering personal and professional development opportunities, which I think it, just kind of goes right in hand with WISE and, what your goals are. And then with MAP on the other side, we're really working to try to eliminate the stigma of mental health and the challenges that come with mental health, and also bring awareness to all the different amazing tools that are available and resources available, not only to our employees, but also their loved ones. while also just fostering a safe space for people to connect and really start to build a community that they can, come to people when they have issue or when they need to, talk something through, or when they are looking for help. So I know I'm personally very proud to be a member of each of these groups here at Paycor, and just super excited to be partnering with you, Stevie, on this, and looking forward to other partnerships in the future for sure. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brad so that he can talk a little bit more about MAP and how we came to create this project here at Paycor and everything that we're doing with that.
Yeah, so really excited to be here. We're actually a brand new group. We kind of launched back at the start of May. This has been an ongoing project of mine since last November, you could kind of say. And that's kind of where this whole process started. So me personally, I actually deal with anxiety and PTSD on kind of a regular basis. So kind of back November, I kind of dealt with a really big family traumatic event. Kind of fell through the cracks, didn't do what I kind of needed to do in regards to, going to my therapist, kind of going through my coping mechanisms. Instead, I kind of put my nose to the grindstone and just focused on work. Things kind of progressively got worse. My ability to do my job started to decline. And then I knew there was an issue, but it got to the point to where I was in that weird spot to where I wanted to reach out, but I didn't feel comfortable reaching out to my management at that point. So I kind of turned a blind eye to that, and I was like, you know what? No, it's fine. I'm just going to keep doing what I need to do at work. Come July, during our super peak season, things kind of fell apart really quickly and really badly. I got to the point to where I either was going to turn in my resignation letter or I needed to reach out. I kind of reached out to a coworker that I kind of I confide in, I trust a lot. They gave me the little nudge that I needed to reach out to my manager, who I absolutely love. And from there, they kind of just opened up their arms and welcomed me in and was like, cool, what do you need? Let's put your work on hold. Let's focus on you. Let's get you back up and running. Basically, I told them that I really didn't know how to function at my job anymore. And they kind of walked me through the steps, got me back up and running. And the whole reason why this group got started is during one of those meetings I had with my manager, I was just joking around being like, if we had a mental health group somewhere that would have fostered a safe environment, somewhere that I know I could have gone to before reaching that pivotal moment of, do I leave or do I ask? I wouldn't have ever reached that point. And she was like, why don't you just start it yourself? And I kind of thought, why don't we have that group? So I started reaching out to management, connected with our HR department, and slowly started building this out. And like I said, in May, we were able to finally launch this group. It's been fantastic so far. I'm so happy to be here with this as well. But just the outpour of support that I've seen, not only within the company, but also with the other organizations that I've been reaching out to and connecting with, and just the positive attitude that I've been seeing with people wanting to break down this negative stigma that comes with mental health, and just being more open about it. And, it's not something that you should be discouraged that you're dealing with, or feel like you're inadequate or less of a person, because you're not. It's okay to go through what you're going through. It doesn't make you less of a person. And that's what I want to really focus on and bring that to light, that it's okay to be you, and it's okay to have your own issues. It makes you no less of a person.
That's amazing. And as we talked about this before, this was one of those situations where I said, there's so many opportunities for your situation that I've observed to go wrong, right? Somebody didn't step in, somebody didn't, say something, your manager didn't receive the information well, and all of that went right, and it was amazing, right? And so what if we just went into this thinking, expecting the best possible outcomes? And that's the part that I'm just the most excited about, is how do we think about reducing the stigma so we can expect the best possible outcomes from everybody? And so as we think about the today, that's what I want you to do, is think about, why is it that 1 in 2 people are frightened of people with mental illness. And why is it that 4 in 5 people believe it's harder to admit in having a mental illness versus other illnesses? How do we shorten the time frame between the 10 years that it takes between someone identifying that they have a mental illness and seeking professional help? And how do we make everybody understand that they're not alone? That 1 in 5 Americans will experience mental illness in a year. And I think that as we understand each other more as humans and we really start to get into more of the conversation and dialogue about how we can be there for each other and support each other as a community, that's where I'm just really thrilled and excited about diving into this today, because this is going to be a catalyst to help prepare you for understanding how to seek help and how to provide help to others. And so I would love to start off today by just going into the chat and in a word, how are you feeling today? Like mentally, physically, I just want one word. In case nobody asked you that today, I wanted you to feel like you're seen and then heard, and we're grateful that you're here. Nervous and excited. Tired. I hear that. I have a 4-year-old. Burnt. Yes, grateful. Edging, exhausted. Right. Ready for a break. Absolutely. Tired. Let's take a really deep breath. This is going to be a lot of information coming at you, and the intention today is that this is supposed to make us feel alive. And as Nori said, it's supposed to make us take that anxiety and help arm us with the tools to be able to harness our life and letting today be day one. And so I am thrilled to get into the speakers and introduce each one of them. When I introduce you, please just go ahead and wave for everybody. The first person that I am going to introduce you to is Maggie Wilhelm. So Maggie is a licensed mental health therapist, and she is our resident mental health coach at Wise Wellness Guild. Maggie has vast experience in working with cognitive and behavioral therapy, as well as interpersonal psychotherapy, and specializes in combining the two evidence-based modalities to help clients through significant change. Maggie has recently expanded her practice to include empowerment coaching, which focuses on building self-worth and confidence through powerful principle of acceptance versus change. This is something that I personally have found to be mind-blowing. So if you are not familiar with CBT and DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, it is just fantastic. And I'm sure that Maggie will speak more to that. She is additionally seeking safety and trauma-focused certification in safety and trauma-focused CBT for survivors struggling with trauma and substance abuse. And she has extensive experience in practicing dialectical behavioral therapy, which provides practical tools for coping with life's most difficult emotions. And so Maggie what we'll do is we'll introduce everybody, and then we'll get into a little bit of each of their topics. So the next person is Courtney Carroll. So Courtney Carroll is a licensed professional counselor who studied public health at Tennessee State University. She received her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at Cincinnati Christian University. Courtney is passionate about her community and serving them intentionally. Courtney is the co-founder of Minority Therapists of Cincinnati, an organization that was created to build the minority mental health community of Cincinnati and surrounding areas. Dr. Maria Espinola. We worked together we overlapped a little bit at UC Health and actually have grown our relationship after I left UC Health. But Maria Espinola, she is an expert in diversity, women's, and trauma. And so Dr. Espinola was born and raised in Argentina. She studied psychology at the University of Buenos Aires and immigrated to the United States in 2001. She completed her doctorate in clinical psychology at Nova Southeastern University, her predoctoral fellowship in multicultural psychology at Boston University Medical Center, and her postdoctoral fellowship in trauma psychology at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Espinola is assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at UC and media psychologist. So she's received over 25 awards for leadership, diversity initiatives, innovation, and community impact. And I'm sure that you've seen her speak on a multitude of different outlets, ABC News, CBS, and she is just phenomenal in this space. I know that I've opened up to Dr. Espinola about my experience with PTSD after 2 active shooter situations. And just, I think that her ability to catalyze change in people to actually go and seek help and providing not only a listening ear, but solutions is something that you're gonna find just incredible today. And our physician in residence at Wise Wellness Guild is Dr. Gina Macrone. She is a general surgeon at the Christ Hospital and has additional certification in critical care after completing her fellowship at the University of Cincinnati Hospital, or UC Health in Cincinnati, a level 1 trauma center. Here she developed extensive experience with trauma and ICU patients working directly with first responders. And Gina is also the medical director of the Christ Hospital Medical Spa, providing whole self wellness in healthcare setting. She is just absolutely incredible. And as we are growing Wise, one of the pieces that we really want to focus on is making sure that healthcare providers feel like that this is a space of support for them, because they do put so much on their shoulders. And so Gina today will be speaking to those healthcare providers who have been the most deeply impacted by COVID, but really ongoing. A lot of times it's just Tuesday for them because the things that they see and experience are things that are just beyond what a normal human usually experiences. So, okay, that is enough about me. This is not why you came to hear me speak. This is not why you came to listen to this. You came to hear more from each of our speakers. And so just as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this, incredibly excited. The piece that I would say is that this is intended to spark conversation. If you've got questions in the moment, put them into the chat. We will circle back to those questions after each speaker has had the ability to engage. If you've got an immediate question, feel free to raise your hand, and you can either go into the chat or I can take you off of mute if you want to speak directly to somebody. This is not intended to constitute as medical advice. And so as you see, if you ask me a question and you are looking for advice, I will rephrase it as a very broad question. And it's not to diminish your question. It's purely because this is not a platform to provide any sort of treatment. And so if you are seeking treatment, we are more than happy to direct you to those folks. So thank you so much, and let's go ahead and dive in. So first we will be hearing from Maggie Wilhelm. Maggie, I would love for you to share just a little bit about what is PTSD? Let's just start with the basics. Would love to hear more about your definition of PTSD, and then are there common co-occurring disorders or symptoms that manifest with PTSD? You might be on mute. Hold on one second, Maggie. There we go. Okay.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to start really quick and just thanking Brad for sharing his experience, because I do think that a large part of destigmatizing mental health, all mental health, is is being honest and being vulnerable and sharing. And so I just really appreciate that you shared that, and that you took the initiative at your site to create programming that's really going to support, you know, all your colleagues. And that's a huge part of this process. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, so post-traumatic stress disorder, what is it? There's a lot of criteria, and I'm just going to quickly go through. You don't have to meet every aspect of these criteria to be diagnosed with PTSD. However, one part is that you do have to be exposed to what we would consider a traumatic event. And I'm going to get into in a minute. There are different levels of trauma. We have complex trauma, we have big T's and little t's, and I'll go over that in a second. But in general, just talking about the criteria of what does PTSD look like. So it would first be being exposed to that traumatic event, which could be violent in nature. It could be the threat of death, the threat of physical or emotional violence. It could be the actual event itself. So not just the threat of it, but experiencing being a victim of crime, being, as Stevie said, in an active shooter situation. And what's important to note is that you do not have to have any physical or bodily harm to experience PTSD. It's not, sorry, I'm hearing some background noise. I got distracted. But it's not that your body actually has to be harmed. It can be, but that's not necessarily a criteria piece. But then after the experience of that traumatic event, there's a lot of symptoms that come with it. And it's bodily symptoms, it's emotional symptoms, cognitions. There's a lot of elements. So some of these would be intrusive memories, nightmares, flashbacks, changes in your behavior. So we see a lot of avoidance, avoiding the stimuli, so the place or the event where this trauma actually occurred, or things that remind us of that event. So could be crowded places, could be loud places, could be events that, for example, a common one is a lot of folks hate fireworks after experiencing a war zone because it triggers that trauma. There's also overly negative feelings in your affect, in your mood, as well as your cognition. So feeling that the world is a dangerous place, feeling that everything's bad or that you're bad, specifically related to you. There's a lot of irritability and aggression, a lot of difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, things of that nature. And again, you don't have to meet every single one of these criteria, but these are some of the most common ones. Being easily startled. And it is important to note that if you're within 30 days of your traumatic experience, this is the time period that we call acute stress disorder, and it's very common that we continue to have those flashbacks, those feelings of hypervigilance, of am I safe? But in order to be diagnosed with PTSD, it would have to be past that 30-day mark. So keep that in mind if you yourself have experienced something, or if you have a loved one who's going through something. And then the last part of this diagnosis, which doesn't always occur, but especially with complex trauma, and complex trauma is chronic trauma. It's when you are repeatedly exposed to events that you feel your life could be at risk, you're endangered. And a lot of times this happens like in domestic violence situations, in a child who's being abused at home, but it can also be in your community, being exposed to gang violence, being exposed to discrimination. Repeated exposure to these things is what we call complex trauma. And often in that situation, we also see dissociative states. And dissociation can be characterized by derealization and depersonalization, which are symptoms of feeling like you're in a fog or a dream, feeling like you're experiencing things outside of your own body. This one is pretty common in with the more violent trauma, sexual trauma for sure, war trauma, things of that nature. And Stevie, you also brought up co-occurring disorders, which is a really important thing to note. I wanted to say earlier that depression and anxiety both are extremely common in our society. We don't talk about it, but about 1 in 4 people experiences depression or anxiety. And these are very commonly co-occurring with PTSD. So we see often anxiety, we see depression, we see obsessive compulsive disorder, because they fall under like an anxiety umbrella, so to speak. We also see a lot of substance use disorders with PTSD, and a lot of times that's self-medicating because the symptoms are so intrusive to the body and the mind that it's a way to cope, sadly. And so another one that I have experienced in my work is eating disorders and PTSD, specifically with sexual trauma. So I've worked with a lot of clients who either have experienced sexual trauma and will dissociate and actually have binge eating episodes, or the opposite. They've experienced sexual trauma and there's often this feeling of wanting to not be in their own body, wanting to sort of be invisible, to not be seen, to not be looked at as womanly or desirable or attractive. And that usually goes the opposite route into the anorexia. But these two are very often co-occurring. And I found a statistic that individuals with PTSD are 80% more likely than those without trauma and PTSD to meet the criteria for another diagnosis.
Need to go off of mute. Okay, I'm navigating this. No, Maggie, that's amazing. And I think that as we think about some of those co-occurring those co-occurring pieces, it just speaks to the fact that this is such a personal, it's so personal, and that's probably why it makes it so difficult to self-diagnose or to know who to even reach out to and go to for help. And I think that that's what we're trying to say today, is that all of these things are very, very much occur in many people and at different points of time. And what is needed in treatment and that's available can really vary based on your resources and access to those resources. And I think that what I have been really pleased with as I've entered into this wellness space is that there are a plethora of free resources available and people to call and speak to that can help you at least start your journey there. I guess the last, I just have one question before we kind of move on with Courtney, is more around as you think about the varying degrees of trauma, are there ways for you to are there things that you can do to start to start to acknowledge on your own, or are there ways to catalyze the conversation? And I know Dr. Espinola is going to get into a little bit of coping, but what would you say with the varying degrees is kind of the first step in that?
Yeah. I think when it comes to treatment, and as you said, I know Dr. Espinola is going to go into coping, so I'm not going to talk about that, but when it comes to acknowledging your own mental health, whether it's trauma or any other struggle that you're having, the first signs of difficulty would be drastic changes in your mood or drastic changes in your behavior. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you are a person who has always been very outgoing and social, and all of a sudden you're isolating a lot, that's a sign that something's going on. If you, let's say you're a student, or most of us are adults, but if you have children that are in school, if you go from having A's and B's to suddenly C's and D's, or if your work performance, your productivity, and even your daily life tasks, if they become more difficult, that's a sign that something's going on. And that's where you want to ask for help and you want to seek help. I remember, I'll share personally, I've experienced depression, and I remember a big sign for me was one day I was getting ready for work, and I went to my closet to pick out clothes, and I just started crying because it felt like too much work, too much energy to even pick out clothing for the day. And in that moment, I didn't know that that was a sign. And I even looked back and was like, you're a therapist. You should have known this, you know? And so sometimes it's a lot harder to see in yourself. But when those little things start to become so much harder, that's a sign. And that's the first step that you want to ask someone for help. And I know, Stevie, we had talked a little bit about treatment. I don't want to go too into detail about that, but I will say that when it comes to treatment for PTSD or any other mental health issues, we always want to look at the person as a whole. You mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and are the basic needs met? Is a person homeless? Are they eating? You know, I worked at the eating disorder clinic. We had people whose heart rate was so low that priority number one was, you need to go to the hospital. You're emaciated. So we didn't begin treatment at that point. It was all about physical health first. So we really look at the biopsychosocial model. We look at that hierarchy of needs, and safety comes first. So if a person is homeless or not eating, that's number one. Then we look at, are there other safety concerns? Are they having suicidal thoughts? Are they self-harming? Those are safety things that are number one in treatment. And then as we can kind of check off those boxes in the hierarchy of needs, then we can move forward. But we always want to treat the person as a whole, a human being who, as I think Brad said, like we all experience mental health issues, mental health problems, just as we experience physical problems. And so treating the person as a whole. And there are lots of different types of treatment for PTSD. There's group therapy. Seeking Safety is one of the things I'm certified in, which addresses both PTSD and substance use, and that's in a group setting. There's individual approaches, so cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and somatic, really checking in with your body, such as EMDR treatment. There's lots of different treatments, and whatever you are seeking help for, or a loved one that is seeking help, you know, picking a person, a therapist who's the right fit, and a treatment that's the right fit is really important.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Maggie. And like I said, I encourage you guys, I'm starting to see questions come into the group chat, so, or into the individual chat. You can send them to me privately, and I will read them at the end, or you can open them up to the entire group if you want them to follow along. So thank you for that. So next is, we are going to be speaking to Courtney Carroll. So Courtney is somebody that I know is highly sought after in the community, in our greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky community. And part of that is because she is amazing and fabulous, but a lot of it is because I think that being open, and in particular, you know, being a Black therapist, You shared stories with me about people, you know, DMing you on Instagram and reaching out. And so I'm really just would love for you to share a little bit about your experience during this time and kind of caring for your community, and just share a bit about, you know, we talk a lot about secondary trauma and what that looks like.
So, thank you to I just want to say thank you to everybody that came on and decided to sacrifice their time to even just listen to us. That does something for us as well. So thank you. But so when Stevie reached out to me, I had made a post about secondary trauma simply because I no longer work for a huge corporation. I used to work for Children's Hospital. I used to work for other big organizations before. And so now being independent and working in a practice right now where I can come in, I make my own schedule, I have some freedom to like, hey, you know what, I'm going to take 2 weeks off. I can take a week off. My heart went out to all those people who are essential workers, who are showing up, all those frontline people, and that the people who don't get a chance to stop and to feel and to just be. So secondary trauma, I'm like, what is this that we're experiencing? What could they possibly, what is the name for this? So, you know, Maggie mentioned PTSD. Secondary trauma isn't something necessarily that's in the DSM, but it's something that is very real. And there's a lot more information than what I thought it was. So basically, it's stress resulting from helping or wanting to help someone who's been traumatized or a suffering person. So as a Black woman, it's almost like, okay, now I have this thing to actually say, this is what this is when I see someone someone being hurt that looks like me, or someone experiencing something. And it isn't just limited to a Black culture thing. It could be open to people who are essential workers or people who work in trauma fields like teachers, nurses, doctors, social workers, therapists, and even civilians as well. So, and also I saw something about judges, lawyers, people who constantly see others in a space that is traumatic. And sometimes we don't give ourselves that space. We feel it, we see it, and now we have access to trauma when we're going through our phones, when we're clicking on the TV. You know, we used to see people lose their lives on TV shows, and now we can actually go to a link and see this happening. Or, you know, we saw people being sick, or we saw these different things, but to actually see a pandemic in our culture right now in our world is so real for us. And it may not be in our space and we're affected by it, but there are people who are truly internalizing all of this, but still being asked to show up, still have this expectation to be. And then not only thinking about going home and still having these expectations, but to walk into work, walk into spaces where they have to be powerful and strong and brave and smart and on, and feeling so connected to all that's going on around them. So when I was asked to speak, I wanted to speak for the women, or for the person or the man or whomever who is still being asked to show up, even though they're feeling all of this. And Bradley, again, you're the first person, you kind of spoke on this and shared your story. And there's so many different things with that guilt of should I even say anything? Because people are expecting this piece of me. And personally, I am I'd say a colorful person. So people have an expectation for me to be colorful. And there's sometimes, you know, I just remember walking in and like, all right, I got to be here. They're ready for me, when I should have said, I'm here today, but I'm not here today. This is what I need. And bringing in that education about what someone is experiencing based upon what's going on around them, and giving some new language and some new identifiers so that we can support other people, even if we're not experiencing it, or even if our job isn't an essential one. Well, everyone's job is essential, let me say that. But if it's not like a frontline one to trauma and connected to our spaces. So I think I answered your question about what it is. I'll go on and on. So
no, that's amazing. Oh shoot, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. Okay. So that's absolutely amazing. And I guess my question to you then is, you know, as we think about there's some ways that I think we can, as just any sort of communication that we'll come back to at the end, but I'm looking forward to your response on how do we ask for time away? And that's such a tricky thing as women who are wanting to be powerful and step up and feel like on a daily basis, there's a lot of us who have a hard time asking for help. And so I will come back to you on that because I want to move on to Dr. Espinola. But I think that that's something just in particular with what's going on. We're all just coming out of a pandemic and then stepping into this new space where we feel helpless, and being able to ask for that I think is really crucial. So thank you, Courtney. All right, Dr. Espinola, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you focus a lot on women's issues, trauma, diversity, all three highly important areas, especially in today's conditions. And so can you speak to some of the challenges that some of your clients are facing today? I know we talked a lot about Me Too movement, everything kind of going on with the LGBTQ community and in that space. And if you've got any recommendations on skills that people can leverage to manage their trauma-related symptoms.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Bradley, also for sharing your story and for what Courtney said and Maggie shared, all very helpful information. So in terms of coping skills, I mean, I think we're going through a very challenging time. I mean, it's the middle of two pandemics. So on one side, we have the coronavirus, and then we have the racism pandemic. So my patients are being challenged in multiple fronts. And so I think when it came to the coronavirus pandemic, I actually created a YouTube channel to share many different skills for free, because prior to that, I already had people waiting for 6 months to come see me. And it was very frustrating, and I felt very sad for them because I couldn't provide the treatment that they were seeking. And then when I was faced with the pandemic, I figured, okay, I just gonna make it available for everybody so everybody can benefit from this. So some of the skills that I share on one side have to do with individual skills, and then on the other is more towards advocacy. And then something in the middle, just like to find the balance. Right? So for people who are impacted by, so who are victims of sexual assault and participate in the Me Too movement, for people who have experienced racial trauma and are participating in the Black Lives Matter movement, and then for immigrants who participated in defending the rights of children at the border. I mean, they all share similar experiences in the sense of wanting to advocate for these communities, and LGBTQ, of course, and all their rights and defending and advocating for the community. It's very similar in the sense of okay, how do I balance advocating for my community and also taking care of myself? So when it comes to women, it's even more difficult, because women, there's something that I specialize in women's issues, as you said, and something that we discuss a lot with female patients is the issue of gender socialization. So those are all the messages that we receive growing up about what does it mean to be a woman, right? Like what defines a woman. And usually the messages that we receive from TV, movies, school, family, and the culture in general is you have to put the other people's needs before your own, right? So even as we are little, we are giving dolls and we are told fairy tales. And so everybody grows up with this idea that, okay, in order to find happiness, you have to get married, you have to have children, you have to take care of others. So people are, so a lot of my patients share the challenges of having to deal with frustrations related to that. So with the coronavirus pandemic, what many of them share is I wanted to get married so badly. And now that I'm married and with the same person all day, every day, we're having a lot of challenges and I don't know what to do with that. And with motherhood, the same thing, worse actually. Just the idea of like feeling very frustrated, very stressed over having to take roles that they never had to take on before and spending all those hours taking care of the kids. And what is very common among my patients is the idea of, okay, on one side, they feel really frustrated and aggravated and sad, and you have a lot of anxiety associated with raising children. And they also, so it's terrible really, because they feel very uncomfortable sharing those feelings with others for fear that they will be rejected or that people will have negative opinions of them. So one thing that I did observe during the coronavirus, it was the first time that I actually saw people publicly share those frustrations. It's sometimes in the forms of memes or shows, but they were there. So people, so I think that allow some of my patients to feel a little bit better because they realize, yeah, okay, so I'm not alone in this. Like it's something that a lot of people go through. And so I think it's really important for women to receive that support, you know, and like to be able to share with others and find that connection. So in terms of skills, when it comes to self-care, I really encourage women to find that female support, and because it has been actually proven by research studies that having girlfriends who are supportive with you can be extremely helpful for your mental health and physical health. So making that a priority is really important, whether you are like talking on the phone. So during this pandemic, I actually maintain like Zoom meetings with my girlfriends, like brunch Zoom meetings, but it was a priority, like to maintain that. One, because like out of principle, I don't like to recommend anything to my patients that I wouldn't do myself. So oftentimes, even when I really, really don't feel like exercising, I really push myself because I know like I am telling that to people all the time, and I want to stay with like, I want to be consistent and lead by example, right? So, so those are some of the issues that I discuss with my patients. I also push a lot for building a structure. So with coronavirus, so this is something that I always push for, building a structure. It's really helpful for mental health to have that. But with the coronavirus, it became very prevalent that people would like, who in the past, so like, all I want to do is like to have nothing to do all day. It would be so wonderful. And when they got to that experience, they felt like they were just alone with their thoughts, and that didn't feel comfortable at all. So I work with them into building a structure. So what we do is just, we put like 1/3 of the time is dedicated to self-care, 1/3 of the time we dedicated to building mastery, and 1/3 is to promote fun activities.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard that before. So it's a third self-care, a third mastery, and what was the third one?
Fun.
Fun. Ooh, that's great. I love that. I think that the philosophy of self-care, I think sometimes there's so much guilt associated with taking a step back, or that laziness that you do feel. I know for the first, month, I saw pictures of people were making bread. Like there were all these people making bread in quarantine. And I was like, who are all these people making bread? How do they have time to make bread? I realized like I was just running myself ragged because I didn't know what else to do. Like I'm totally guilty of that. Like again, barely, I'm teaching people about burnout, and what's happening is it's that control, right? Of like, I can control my world and my life, and my experience in kind of coping with my PTSD is like the loss of control, right? And the loss of like the ability to know, like, when really at the end of the day, like I know that that's the issue, I still just don't listen to myself. I kind of just continue to push and think I'm going to change the outcome. So I think, if we're talking about, forms of different coping mechanisms, I mean, is that something that you recommend that somebody work with a professional to like kind of create that plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally try to make sure that people look at different professionals. So like one would be a therapist, a psychologist, but also I always talk about them to go to the PCP and OBGYN, like just making sure that all those needs are being met as well. Also sometimes personal trainer or setting up a little gym at the house, or even like just with YouTube videos and having like a few equipment there. But yeah, so it's like a number of professionals and other people and other resources that have to be engaged in the treatment in the process of recovery. Sometimes, so I do work a lot with treatment teams and I collaborate with many different professionals, including lawyers, because my patients sometimes are dealing with divorce issues or child custody issues or immigration. So oftentimes I do collaborate with them as well.
That's fantastic. Wow. That's, I think that there's in the Q&A, I want to ask a few questions of you, just in regards to the steps of, you know, like being accountable. It's like taking medicine. It's, you know, like it only works if we do it, right? If you actually like, and I love that philosophy that you would never give people the advice that you wouldn't take yourself. But I think that even more importantly, you wouldn't, a lot of this isn't something that is drastic, right? A lot of it is just like getting back to those basics and really taking care of yourself at a very primitive level and like getting in tune with yourself. So that's fantastic. Awesome. Well, then we'll go ahead and dive into Dr. Gina Macarone. I know, Gina, you talk a lot about your experience in being, you know, a surgeon and, you know, being on the front lines of the COVID pandemic is just, like I said, one of the many things that you've kind of encountered, but there are so many people, you know, ongoing with healthcare professionals that don't really get a break. And this is something that for me, just in my life, I've experienced, you know, when in working with healthcare, being an outsider, I've for the most part felt empowered working in the business community to, if I needed to take a personal day or take a vacation day, I did. I just did. And it was something that I just kind of leaned into. But I know that for healthcare professionals, that's not always the culture that is, you know, that's not always highly thought of. And so I wanted you to just share a little bit more about your experience, any, you know, thoughts you have for the healthcare community and what you might recommend to them. Oh, Gina, I think you're on mute. Let's see. Let's get you off the mute here. Okay, there we go.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thanks again for joining us. And thank you, Stevie, for making arrangements for this wonderful, wonderful session that I hope will be helpful for everyone. And what my goal is to speak a little bit about secondary trauma and how it comes to light in healthcare workers, particularly during COVID, but I also want to emphasize that the things that I'm talking about apply to anyone, and they're all common sense. It's not like we don't know these things, but the important part is having the self-discipline to make self-care your priority, because if you don't, you can't do your work well. You can't take care of your family well. You can't do your, you know, daily activities as well as you could unless you take care of yourself. And so first I'll go over just a couple of statistics that apply to PTSD and healthcare workers, specifically physicians, because that's where there is some data coming out that apply to doctors, but they really, anyone in healthcare is susceptible to secondary trauma. So, and then after that, I'll kind of go into the signs and reiterate some of the things that Maggie said, and then go over some techniques and the things that we need to move forward with as a whole, as the general public. Some of the statistics that I wanted to share that are not glamorous by any means, but I feel they need to be brought to light, is that every day in the United States, a physician commits suicide. And that is 2 times the normal rate of the general public. And part of the problem with physicians and healthcare workers in general is, as we've said several times, we are hesitant to ask for help because that seems like a sign of weakness. And it's admitting that maybe you can't get the job done, or admitting that you need a break, when the culture in medicine, and it's worse in certain specialties, is such that there's that stigma that's there, and people don't feel like they can come forward and ask for help. And that's the main thing that we are trying to bring to light in this session in general, is it's okay. Ask for help. We need to do that for all of those reasons that I stated before. And so some of the things that can be signs that we're not making self-care a priority are using other substances to medicate yourself at the end of the day, making big life changes, staying too busy and feeling like you can't slow down or take a break, and seeing others' needs as more important than your own, and also not wanting to talk about, things that are hard to talk about. They're uncomfortable. So if you're starting to notice that if there's something you're avoiding or something you're trying to stay away from, then that is a sign that that's something that needs to be addressed. It's your brain and your body telling you that you need to pay attention and try to do something about this. And so, these things, I'm going to kind of go through little things that just are common sense, but I feel the need to say aloud, is for healthcare workers during their shifts when they're working for long segments of time and there's a really high intensity level that can't be maintained, because your adrenaline can only last so long. And that applies to anyone who's in a stressful situation. You can only last so long on adrenaline alone. And at some point you have to take a break and address the stress itself. So ways to do that would be checking in with yourself every couple of hours, saying, how am I doing? Do I feel overwhelmed? Do I feel anxious? And unfortunately, that is going to be something that needs to be addressed on a bigger level, because if you're in a job where you're very busy and you feel like you don't have the opportunity or the time to check in with yourself, there needs to be more people around. There needs to be more staff to be able to get these jobs done, because we need backup and we need support from each other. And if someone needs to take a personal day, we need to be able to have the resources and the staff to replenish that and provide that for the community in general. Checking in with your family, checking in with your friends, working in teams, or having a buddy that you're accountable to, making sure that you're doing okay, taking little breaks to meditate, be mindful, just be quiet and silent, even if it's for a minute or two, can really reset your brain and help you get back to the task at hand. And basics, hierarchy of needs, eating, drinking water, all of those things, again, seem silly to mention, but there'll be times where I'm going through my day and I realize I haven't had a sip of water in 8 or 12 hours. And that's the reason why I have not had to take a bathroom break, TMI. But it's paying attention to your basic bodily needs. And as women, especially with children around, we're really not very good at that. And it, again, takes discipline to be able to pay attention to these things, to make yourself function at your best. And One other thing that Maggie always mentions is if you're dealing with something that's difficult, if you're dealing with a loss, there has to be a moment for acceptance. There has to be some time for acknowledgement. And I find myself in situations where I'm taking care of patients who are, that I can't help, or, you know, death is imminent. And I have to kind of give myself a moment and say, I have to accept that I'm not going to be able to fix this, even though that's what I want. I want to be able to fix everyone, but you have to take a moment to say, this is something I can't fix. It's out of my control. How do I make the best of it? How do I get through this and then move on, but still give it the humanity that it deserves, and still identify, you know, I try to identify with the family and to some extent grieve with them, but I can't let myself dwell on that. I need to be able to move on when it's time. And so all of these things, like I said, are important and can be applied to any situation, as far as, especially during COVID, because we're all stuck at home, we're all stressed, we're all nervous and scared, and that is okay. And we need to acknowledge it and talk about it with each other. As far as how do we solve these problems going forward, I hope that COVID has provided an opportunity for our healthcare administrators and government agencies to realize that healthcare workers were stressed before this even started and had a lot of things that they were dealing with that intensified even further when COVID began. And we need more resources. It's not okay that a doctor commits suicide every day. We need to destigmatize. We need resources. We need programs in place to be able to help these people. And that's why it's every time I talk to a medical student or someone who's in schooling and they say they're interested in psychiatry, psychology, therapy, I'm so excited because we need those people. We need them for all of us, and it's okay. And we just need to remember that. And so for everyone who's listening, take a moment, take some deep breaths. I'm going to take a deep breath because I'm nervous and I'm about to be finished talking. So just take those moments when you need them, and it's okay. Whatever it is can wait a minute. And take care of yourself.
That's awesome. Thank you, Gina. And
Sure.
There's a lot packed into what you just said that I think we can all learn from. So much of us, I can speak for myself. I'm working from home, and I have a really terrible habit in pre-COVID life of stacking my days to where, I was squeezing blood out of a stone, right? I was just like trying to get every moment out of every day. And in those moments, I've started to let that creep back in a little bit during COVID, because Zoom meetings, I can be sitting in front of Zoom meetings for 10 hours. Sometimes. I know. And my eyes are like just boiling. And I'm like, what? Like, my eyes are so dilated and I feel like I'm screaming constantly. And then you get out of it and you're like, oh my gosh, but that was just that's just how it is. And I think that there's so much with this time, right, that we've read about having this space that COVID created for us, that only allowing for habits and things to kind of creep back in that were in service of what we wanted them to be. And then now there's a lot of fear around, productivity. If I'm not productive, that I might not have a job, or that if I don't do this perfectly as a mom, if I don't show up this way, then I've had all this time to perfect being a mom, and now like I haven't got it figured out because it's summer now and they're out of school, and it's this ever evolving, ever changing thing. And it's really, Abby Allen said this best when we were in a virtual wellness month, is that this isn't unprecedented times. Like it's been like this for a really long time. And I think that anybody who is in this space, it's not that, you know, for these new times, and that we're moving into this next normal, that a lot of the things that maybe you haven't managed or dealt with, that 10-year average of things that you haven't dealt with, it's just the quiet that's given you some time to allow for that to bubble up and creep up. And how do you use this opportunity to manage your own mental health and prioritize that, and kind of get yourself into a place where you can have the right baseline to be strong enough to go in and decide, and not just let life keep happening to you, I think is just the piece that I want to reiterate with you, is like, it starts with the decision to take a step back. And it starts with the decision to be able to say, I'm gonna go outside and get some sunshine, because I'm gonna do that today for myself. And I'm gonna do that for 5 minutes because that's what I need. And I think that there is something so powerful in being able to raise your hand and say, I'm my first priority right now. Everything will be okay if I step away. So that's fantastic. And so I know that we've got some questions that are showing up in the chat here to me. I would love to give the presenters just a moment to kind of address anything that kind of came to mind or build on anything. We're moving into really more the conversational portion of the discussion now, that I am really excited about, because this is where the magic kind of happens. So I'll take everybody off of mute now, and just, like I said, let me know if you want to share anything additional. Let's see, Maria. Okay, we've got Courtney and Gina and Maggie. Okay, great. Maggie, I know you shared something about the 3 components of wellness and CBT. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, because I loved what Dr. Espinola said about how she kind of will prioritize in her sessions. I have found the same thing to be really effective, because it's very easy to spend a whole hour processing like one event in our week that was really frustrating or really difficult. And so having some time to dedicate towards coping skills, to dedicate towards like, what do I need to do this week to check in with myself and take care of myself. And I love those 3 components in CBT. The 3 components of wellness are connection, human connection and support, as well as having a sense of mastery or accomplishment. So setting small attainable goals for yourself throughout the week. And those can be related to anything in your life, whether it's, I need more time for self-care, I'm going to take 10 minutes to walk outside, or perhaps it's your physical health, I'm going to start eating breakfast, or I'm going to walk 30 minutes a day, whatever it is. But having a sense of accomplishment over those things. And then also the third part, which is, what is the third part? Connection, mastery or accomplishment, and scheduling pleasurable activities or fun. And it's so, so important for our mental health. And so I think no matter what you're working on, no matter what you're struggling with, though keeping those 3 components of wellness in mind can always be helpful. And going off of what you said, Stevie, too, I have this phrase that I go back to all the time. I thought of it when Brad spoke as well. What we resist will persist. So no matter what emotion is coming up for you, no matter what symptoms are coming up for you, if you, as Gina said, if you at the end of the day, you know, find yourself pouring that extra glass of wine, or you know, avoiding the conflict, or just going through your day without taking care of yourself at all, those emotions will come back. They disappear briefly, but they come back. So those are more just general wellness, not as much focused on PTSD, but
no, I think that that's so important. And as you understand more, you can get back to the why. Like, you can really understand more about the interesting thing about me, just like being vulnerable, is I even wonder with my PTSD, I was in the 2 active shooter situations, but when I was 4, I found a revolver in the woods while I was playing with a friend. And I talked a lot with my therapist about this, that, you know, in that moment, it's one of those things that I didn't even remember. And I kind of thought it was a dream, but like when you have those moments that kind of pop back up for you later and you realize like this continuing piece, there's a lot that I understand, not being a professional in this space, but like there are things that you can suppress that maybe occurred to you when you're younger, that I know that several of you on the panel have experience working with adolescents, of suppressing some of those memories because they were unpleasant or traumatic, and how they kind of pop back up, and how to even know what was real or not is not necessarily for you to self-identify. And Courtney, that's one area where I would love, I know you work a lot with adolescents and children, and I don't know if you could speak to that at all.
Yes, a few things with that as far as speaking out and advocacy. I think a lot of young people feel as if their issues are not everyone's issues. Their experiences are not everyone's experiences anymore, because, as I like to say to them, once you get to a certain age, you begin to adult. And adult issues and certain things kind of make you minimize your old experiences because you have arrived, or you're now in the space of self-discovery. And so those things, you're like, oh, that heartbreak, that feeling, that is, you'll get past that. Which kind of brings us to this space now where prevention and being proactive. So when I spoke on secondary trauma, I think I left out a few things about people who are experiencing these firsthand, not necessarily these firsthand situations, but seeing it happen to other people, seeing other people get sick, seeing other people be discriminated, seeing other people have these very raw, real experiences. Sometimes we want to be that voice for that, but if it's not necessarily something that is happening to us, or it's actually in our own space, we become comfortable and not necessarily speak out on it. And sometimes that happens to adolescents, you know, it's kind of minimized, or it's just like, well, let me give you this tool, and it's not necessarily validated and actually discussed. And something that Gina said too, about, you know, speaking out and saying how you feel and having a space to do that and taking the moment. Well, I believe often sometimes people want to do that, but that fear of being disposable or replaceable sometimes becomes so heavy. You know, if I do speak out and ask for this, you know, will I be validated, and will I be replaced? That's even for our young professionals. You know, will I get hours cut? Will I, you know, not get that promotion? Maybe I'm not capable, because I spoke out and I asked for this moment. And I think the more we normalize it in the business and corporate America, that people need space, people need time when we are surrounded by these external things that we, one, don't have control over, and some things that have been there. So I think that a lot of preventative things can happen, as far as it may not be something you're naturally experiencing, but if there's an email that can be sent, or talking to someone, and not being reactive to situations, but being proactive when things happen, and even allowing that space for conversation, and not even trying to fix things, but a space, an open door to validate, to assert, and to let people know that they matter and they're not replaceable if they do use their voice.
That's wonderful, and I would love to hear from you. There's so many resources and suggestions on Instagram and ways to kind of approach that, right? And I saw one that was like, instead of asking somebody like open-ended, like, how are you doing? That there were suggestions on other approaches, and it's so hard because that's all you want to do is create the space and open up the conversation. Do you have ways that you, when you're reaching out to peers or friends, like, how do you open the conversation?
In regards to secondary trauma or external things that are happening in the community?
Of like, if you want to be a really great ally or advocate, or you're just seeking to reach out to a friend. What I would love to do is arm this group of people with what is the right vernacular for us to be able to extend that opportunity and step into that in a non-threatening way. And I know you're this sunflower and beacon of hope, and it would feel very natural for you to just do that. I know you reached out to me during COVID of like, hey, just checking in, like, boop, like, how are you? And I would love, like, but I don't know that everybody's like that. So I don't know if you've, or anybody on the panel, if you've got any recommendations on how to maybe step into that.
So let's say we'll use COVID as an example. You and I both don't necessarily, we work with wellness or work in self-care in these areas. So it was an easier thing because, one, of intention, and also two, because of our authentic wanting to know, hey, how are you? And I think sometimes we make things difficult and we try to find special ways to do things when human nature would be just to say, how are you? Right. Just checking in. Yeah. How can I support you? And not looking in ways to fix or to, cover or to find a way to just, understand, because some things I may not ever understand based off of, our experiences in life. So how are you? Just checking in. How can I support you? Are you hungry? Have you had dinner? Just not even, I'm just saying, like, just natural things you would ask, and I think even you reaching out to me when, things happen with the George Floyd situation and, all these different things that were happening in my community as well. And in the world, you didn't say, hey, this is what this is. It was like a genuine checking in. How are you? And then offering when I gave you what I could, what could you do to support? And it was just very human of us to have this conversation. It wasn't a force. It was just natural of us being women and curious about how each other felt. So I would use that as an example.
That's wonderful. And that's so refreshing and kind of like, it's just, again, I think that there's a lot of anxiety right now in general with people of like how to, like with Black Lives Matter, or let's take a friend of mine. It's a very real example. Like, a friend of mine in the last couple of weeks had disclosed some information about a current relationship that she was in that alluded that there might be some sort of domestic abuse. And that conversation happened over a couple of glasses of wine, and then it went away. And re-entering that conversation can be she clearly laid it out there. She clearly said, like, she left it open for me to step into. And we had the dialogue and discussion, and re-entering that conversation in a moment where time has passed. I think that it can just be very difficult for us to be worried that we're going to lose somebody, or that, we want to be there for them, but we don't know how. And I think that just is so refreshing to hear you say, like, just be human, like, step into it. And if it's coming from a loving, authentic place, not seeking to fix, I think is crucial for women. Not seeking to fix, but seeking to be an ear, and provide just a platform. And I think that's I think wonderful. I love that. It's like so easy. Like, it should be easy, right? Like, it's so, I don't know. I love that. And I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next question.
I think just that listening space, Stevie, exactly what Courtney's saying. And this is true across the board for, you know, mental health issues and just everyday life struggles. You know, I remember a few years ago, I had a cousin whose child was stillborn, and it was right before Christmas. And I remember asking her at the Christmas party, "How are you?" And not expecting her to say, "I'm good, I'm fine," you know, just genuinely asking how a person is means a lot. And just sitting with them in that space. And like you said, not trying to fix it, because we get uncomfortable and we want to fix it. But being able to sit with someone in their pain and really listen and hear them can mean a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that being able to, you know people that might be in your life that are, you know, vulnerable. I think that a lot of times we don't check in on the strong ones. I know that that's something that I know that I felt a lot in my life. But also before you lean in, you know, be sure that you are also prepared, that you're strong enough too, right? You have that foundation. And I think that there's just a complete, like I said, don't feel like, you know, it's not feasible for you to be abundance for everybody else if you're still kind of managing your own symptoms and challenges. And that kind of takes us to like there was a question that I think is really important because again, and I want this to go to Dr. Espinola because I think that this is it's really important, is if you're feeling anxious or depressed, does that mean that you have anxiety or depression? Do you always need to be medicated for these, or can we cope with them in other ways? And I know that there's a, like, for me, like that, there's the tightness in the chest, and there's a lot of, or I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. You know, there's such a range, and I know that's such a personal question. So I guess the question is, like, with these symptoms, does that automatically mean that there's a diagnosis, or is there some gray area?
No, so it does not mean that you have a diagnosis right away. No, there are like several criteria that you have to meet in order to be diagnosed with those illnesses. But I think, I mean, a recommendation that I do to my patients and then people in general is just like to make sure that you take care of the things that I mentioned today, like checking out with your PCP to make sure that it's not a medical issue underlying the stress. Also making sure that you're sleeping well. So I'm on the YouTube channel. The first video that I released was on sleep, because sleep is so incredibly fundamental for mental health and physical health. And oftentimes people come like just tired, exhausted, angry, it's just mad with the world, like thinking that they have been dealing with this for a long time, unable to perform at work, like having difficulties in relationships. And then it all came down to sleep. They were sleeping 4 hours a night. And yeah, of course, nobody can function well if you're sleeping 4 hours a night. So you do have to make sure that you meet the 8 hours. If you're not, you're probably going to have some issues in some other areas of your life. So I make that a priority. And the skills that I share on the channel are without medication. And oftentimes that just alone is enough. It's really fascinating. And it comes from DBT, actually, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, the techniques that I teach there. Then, I mean, nutrition, I mean, just making sure, and I'm telling you, it seems like basic, but it's conversations that I have with every single person that comes to see me, you know, like they complain about feeling anxious all day. And then I ask them how often do they eat? They eat once a day, and they eat fast food, or it's just not going to work. You have to take care of that. Same goes with socializing and exercising. Another thing that I mentioned too, that haven't been mentioned this today, with nature. So the connection with nature. So in Europe, a lot of doctors are prescribing connection with nature with people because it's incredibly powerful in the healing process. And in Cincinnati, I feel like very grateful and fortunate here because we have beautiful parks. So I make sure that I go at least once or twice a week. Sometimes I do yoga at the park or just like go for a walk, and that can be incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that you're touching on something with our circadian rhythms, you know, as well, right? When you talk about sleep, I think so much of us, one thing that it's fascinating in the stories that kind of come to us is our thoughts creep in the quiet. And so we get anxious before bed, and then we can't sleep, and then we sleep in too late, and then we never go outside. And then it's like this cycle. But I think that, you know, when you think about exposure to sunlight, and it kind of naturally triggers your body's ability to wake up and be tired, you know, when it's dark out. And I think that, again, so much of this is going back to the foundational stuff of like, get fresh air, get sunlight, but also acknowledge that like that's not always enough. Like, I'm not going to be the person that's like rub a little dirt on it and be like, no, that's in combination with having discussions about your mental health and being open about it with a professional too. But I do think that there's a lot of us that we just do seek out medication, or we seek out, you know, like we want the one side, we want the quick fix, right? This is America. We want like the pill that's going to make it all go away. And I'm just so grateful that medicine is starting to look at these alternative options that maybe make it more accessible for everyone.
Mm-hmm. So. Absolutely. One thing I wanted to say regarding what Dr. Macaron mentioned earlier, I thought was really helpful. Just like taking these breaks throughout the day. So one thing that I have a few videos on this, but it's just like, it has to do with grounding skills. There is one of the most common skills, most used ones is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's like, so you should sit wherever you're at, it could be at your house or in nature, whatever, and think about like 5 things you can see, right? And then 4 things you can, so you have to do like all your senses. So it could be like the second one, it could be 4 things that you can hear. The 3 is like 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and the last one thing you can taste. And that is just like, it helps you ground yourself and feel more connected to your surroundings. So you are like getting out of your head. Because a lot, you know, like we discuss a lot of the behavioral issues in terms of sleep and exercise and stuff. And then the cognitive ones are the other set of issues that play a role in depression and anxiety. So being a lot in your head and going into these ineffective patterns of thinking, where you just go on and on worrying about things, but not really taking any kind of action, that's not helpful. And it really is extremely helpful to take a step back and just be with yourself, ground yourself, and then continue.
I think that that's so powerful of, again, getting yourself to a place where you can just be still for a second and kind of reground yourself instead of moving into the next thing, right? What we resist will persist, I think Maggie said. And I think that, you know, for me, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method was one of the first things that when I started seeing a therapist for my PTSD, that I started to recognize, like when I started to feel that anxiety kind of creep in, what even triggered me starting to see, I thought I was having a heart attack, and I have heart disease in my family. So I was like, I thought for sure. And I think that acknowledging the difference in those symptoms can sometimes be a little bit of an alarming thing of, you know, you would never guess that of me, because I am pretty calm for the most part, I think, and pretty, you know, just like go with the flow. But the amount of stress as we think about our holistic wellness, and we think about sometimes, you know, prioritizing our financial wellness or prioritizing our occupational wellness over our emotional and mental wellness can sometimes just feel, when it's off center, your body will usually be the first that subconscious it will start to manifest and tell you, and being able to have a mechanism to reground in that, I've just found to be incredibly helpful.
That's wonderful. Okay, great. I know that we've got a few other just questions in here. One is that can Dr. Espinola share her YouTube channel? So absolutely. All of the panel speakers we will have as a part of a follow-up email, and I will make sure that we share all of their contact information. They all have a variety of different resources, and the thing that I like to say is, you know, if we really try to partner with a variety of different women with different backgrounds, expertise, and personalities, because we know that all of us are facing a lot of different challenges, and where we're coming from it feels very personal. So I would highly encourage you to you know, check out the content that each one of these presenters does have on social media. We'll make sure that we share that. But if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Wise Wellness Guild, me directly as a part of this invite, and I can kind of direct you to them directly or reach out to them directly. As I mentioned, as I think Dr. Espinola had said, you know, sometimes wait times can be kind of crazy, but we are always happy to point you in the right direction if this is something that's more immediate, that you really are seeking help and ready to get started now. Okay. All right. So there's one last question here that just to address, which is more about how we approach our employers that might not be as open to we talk about that feeling like we're replaceable or disposable. And I'm going to even take it a higher level and talk about even if you're at home, maybe it's not your employer. Maybe this is like, you know, just your place in life, right? Like you want to be the best mom, or you want to be the best daughter, or you want to like be the best worker. Can we talk a little bit about how to start to create the space for ourselves, and how do we ask our employers and set that up? And I think that there's two sides to this. There's one in the advocacy side, and then there's somebody who's suffering from PTSD, mental health challenges. How do we go about that? Like, how do we create more space for conversation in this way?
I'd like to say, I like to speak from a perspective of working at a ground level position, of like being like an entry level working position. And so there were responsibilities that I had to fulfill. And if I didn't fulfill them, then I had a superior. I had someone who held me accountable. And so one thing I didn't know about my position was, you know, at the beginning was just like who that tier was, who are these people, you know, that was my boss's boss's boss and all these things. So I think when I learned what my position was, who was holding me all accountable. And so when I asked for something, I know who to go to. And so that way I communicated with everyone if something was wrong, if I felt like something was I needed something as an employee, whether it was education, whether it was, you know, a conversation about a conflict. So I think knowing, let's say something happened and you felt like your supervisor or someone, and advocating for yourself to have a full communication with everyone, which can be scary, but it's also like, okay, so if all these people are together and this is my job, these are my requirements, and feeling, and which is scary, feeling very, what word am I looking for? Empowered, and knowing who you are, what you have, and asking for those things. And it's hard because it's scary to do that. And I'm only saying it because, bless you, because I've had to like, all right, I know this is my role. This is what I have to do, and I have to advocate for myself. And so just as if putting myself in a position where if I did something that was incorrect, or if I missed a day at work, I would get these tier of people who would reach out to me, or would, you know, hold me accountable. So I would hope that if it came to our mental health, and emailing a supervisor, CCing someone, and letting everyone know that on the same page that something is going on, you need extra support, that they would hold themselves the same accountability as they would if you didn't do something correctly, or if you needed something more for your position, which is very bold to say. I can say that. That's pretty bold to think that, you know, hopefully that they would, but I believe that it's something that needs to be normalized, because it's normalized when we are late or we don't do something, but when we need something because we add an asset to the companies or what we're doing, we should be served in that way, in that manner as well. So that would be very me boldly saying, what would it be like for us as women or as people to really utilize that ladder the way that it's used when we are not doing or can't meet an expectation.
That's so great. And I want to build on that by saying, I think that there's also just as you advocate for yourself, I think that having the opportunity as women, like using the opportunity to also advocate for others, and not by saying, not going to your superior and saying, hey, I think that something, you know, is going on with this person. But maybe just, you know, like I said, reaching out and kind of asking, hey, how are you? And if you are noticing things, you know, they're making sure you are educating yourself on those channels within your work. Like, what is the protocol and procedures? And I know I've had an experience where I saw a former employee who I know had been going through a really hard time, and she used social media as her outlet to tell people about like how she was feeling, and she was expressing some things that were they felt like she may harm herself. And I felt paralyzed and I didn't know what to do. And in that moment, again, I'll be vulnerable. I did approach her manager, who was my peer, and I said, I'm just letting you know that this is what I'm seeing. I feel like I should say something. I feel like I might be breaching her trust. I've talked to her and she says that she's fine and she's putting on a happy face, but like clearly she's communicating this. Like, you might want to just like know that this is happening. I have no idea if that, I would love to hear if you felt that that was the right thing to do or not, because we always worry so much about doing more harm than good in those spaces. And I would never want her to feel like she can't have the social media platform to also talk, or that I called her out or something. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Me personally?
Yeah, you or like anybody. I'm just curious as to what like you would recommend. Yeah.
I personally think that if it was something that it was just very straightforward, and that person you could tell was a cry for help, and also knowing it's very subjective. It really depends on where you are, where you're working, and what the outcome is. And of course, I think with a lot of, not the outcome, but sometimes we do stay quiet about certain things. And things don't get addressed.
Yep.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
And addressing that person and something still doesn't get done, and then that's even scarier. So I think it's a hard thing. I think it's checking that with what's the right time. If that person if that supervisor or whomever you went to is going to be a colleague or a peer that is going to protect and to love and to show love, and not make that person feel exposed, but make them feel like it's a community. But just to, speak about women in corporate America, sometimes it's not always like that. But if you do feel as if it is a space and it's a healthy space and a helpful space, and that is what your internal is saying, I would say go with what feels most natural. But if you know it's not a safe space, really talking to that person, or maybe even communicating to whomever they're closest to see if you can get another ally that is a lateral one.
Yep. No, that's that. I love that. And I know that the folks at Paycor offered, if anybody is interested in kind of building something like this, like they've got for your organization, they're willing to come in and help facilitate that as well. So I think that, if you don't have a space or you don't know, you reach out for the resources for the platform. If it doesn't exist, learn from Brad and Devin and, create the space, because you're not the only one that's going to benefit from that. So that's wonderful and amazing. Thank you, Courtney. We do have 2 more questions that came in, and I think that that's all we're going to have time for. So please, if you have additional questions, put them into the chat. but then we will make sure that they get addressed for you directly if we don't get to those. So the first question is, we're just gonna kind of do a speed round on this, is regarding therapy for our children. So our children are, we have sought therapy for our children. How can we best support our children on this journey? And what is our role as parent, as support, versus their role as person that will be receiving treatment? Dr. Espinola, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Well, Courtney specializes on children, so probably she's better.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine, I'm not a mother, how it would feel to go and take your child to someone and speak about, and they speak on deep things, secrets, things they don't feel comfortable telling you, and feeling like you're the person that you had this baby, you have these people that you're connected to, and now they're an extension, and now they're having all these experiences that you don't even know about. So I think creating spaces to have family conversations about just mental health in general can be helpful. Making a normalized conversation, and so that that child or children doesn't feel singled out, that everyone is taking a step, everyone is having a conversation about it, and everyone is working, because what could happen is one child in the whole household could be going to therapy and everyone else isn't, and this child could feel like alone or feel as if they're ostracized because of that. But I mean, dinner time, having regular conversations about check-ins, making intentional time to sit with each other, or do that nature that that Dr. Espinola spoke on, like going back and getting into that and bringing it together and making it a family thing, is always super important. So if it is just one child, that's how you can support them all together, or the whole family, is asking in the car conversation, hey, how'd your session go? Or, and just making it open up a space and saying and affirming that child every time, like, I'm so proud of you that every time you go, even if they don't say anything the whole time, and even if they were throwing stuff and whatever, and you're saying, I'm just so happy you're here. I'm so happy you even got in the car. I'm so excited that you're getting this experience because I didn't get it. And then your kid may say, well, mommy, what were you like when you were 5? And so then you guys have a whole conversation, and then you're having this bond, and your child is dying to know you and gets to know you. So I would say just affirming them, validating them, and having somewhere where you can go with your feelings about what you're experiencing, because it's difficult not being able to talk to your child and feel connected to them in that, because you want to respect their confidentiality, even though they're your little people. So I would say that just normalizing it, being intentional about family time, and really, having conversations.
I love that. And I think that's so crucial. We're really with any, and I think mental health, with dealing with some of these challenges that we're facing. And I think that even there's a lot that I think you could take from even taking it up to an adult level there too, right? It's again, like small group, getting around a table and just starting the conversation, getting it rolling. So that's
Maggie
great.
got her hand up.
Hi, Maggie.
I wanted to add, I love what you said, Courtney, and it makes the conversation within the family, it destigmatizes going to therapy even within the family. And I wanted to add too, in trauma-focused CBT, which is actually for children ages 5 to 18, one of the primary focuses of the treatment, while we do teach coping skills like grounding and relaxation and cognitive coping to the child, every step of the way, we're also teaching it to the caregiver. And the number one predictor in children's treatment, specifically children's treatment of trauma, the number one predictor of them coming out of that with resiliency and wellness is having at least one supportive adult caregiver who supports them and who believes them. So specifically when it's focused on like a sexual trauma, especially if it's another family member or like mom's boyfriend or an uncle or a situation like that, the number one predictor of them coming out of that with resiliency and wellness is having someone who believes them. So parent support or a caregiver support is extremely important. But another thing in children's research is that we have found within the company that I work for full time, there's research that if a parent is also struggling with a mental health problem and the child comes to treatment, let's say they're acting out in school or something of that nature, and what we found is that if the parent alone gets treatment and nothing is done for the child, but the parent gets support and help for their mental illness, the outcomes for the child go up, meaning their symptoms and behaviors go down and their wellness goes up. So you taking care of yourself is super important for you, but also for your children. And support is like the number one thing that we as human beings need, and the best thing we can do in any treatment, whether it's for PTSD or any other mental health problems. Getting social support, family, friends, therapy, community, those are the biggest protective factors. So I think no matter what you're struggling with, getting that support is huge.
I think that that's amazing. I thank you for all of you for, kind of weighing in on these, because like I said, it's so personal that I think that there's a lot of ways to approach it. There's a piece of this that I'm hesitant to ask it because I think that I think it's important for us to close. So we will take the last 3 minutes to address it, which is been feeling very down and overwhelmed and helpless with Black Lives Matter movement. Within each industry, the presenters are speaking from right now. What would you advise people who want to help but don't know where to start? If this is not the correct channel, I understand, but I do think that there is a sense of, there's a lot of dismantling, a lot of learning happening, a lot of learning that is bringing a lot of guilt and grief, and changing and shifting and evolving. And again, we just got settled in from this next normal, and now we're on to this next thing, and I feel overwhelmed and I'm dealing with that. And I know that this speaks to overall mental health and burnout, but I do think that having just I would love to just have a 3-minute conversation on it. And I know it warrants more, but I do think that I love the question, the vulnerability. I don't know if somebody wants to take that one.
Well, so I can say that I actually, when this started, with all the demonstrations that started, I actually reached out to multiple friends, so multiple Black friends and colleagues, to figure out a way to best support my patients. So I started a series of videos that are specifically on race and the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think tonight I'll be able to release one that is on racial trauma. So just explaining that more. So I think the first step is just really educating yourself, looking at resources. I'm planning to also share a list of anti-racism resources for people to learn more. I also did another video that I'm planning to release, I think probably this weekend, with 2 women, one physician and another one is an executive coach. And with them, we talk about self-care for women of color who are active in advocacy efforts. And then I will do one with a former NFL player, an author, talking about resilience for Black men. And I think, well, so in terms of you being an ally, so being a white person, seeing all of this and wanting to be helpful to friends, colleagues, anyone, I think it's really, so there are several things that I will recommend. The number one for me is to just seriously advocate. So at the beginning, I talked about self-care, but my other passion is advocacy. Advocacy is incredibly important. Advocating for more women and women of color, and well, people of color in general in your workplaces. So make sure that you participate in, I mean, you can participate in demonstrations, certainly, but you can also participate in changing institutional and public policies, and definitely by voting. Like really voting. It's incredibly important right now. Because it's gonna be 4 years of this like constant set of policies that really have caused incredibly harm to people of color, to women, to the LGBTQ community, and a lot of that can be changed by changing the people in power.
Mm-hmm. I'll briefly just say, work starts at home. It starts an internal walk first. I think the misconception sometimes is that walking out your door to do something, picking up the phone to do something, using money to do something is the first step. And I think the first step is just being with self and in it, and processing what you're experiencing, processing what you didn't know, processing all the new education, processing maybe things that have been new to you, or maybe things that you saw that you didn't want to see. So I just say, take your time. I have my own clients who are white, and I have to explain to them the level of guilt and the feelings of that is normal. But knowing that what you do at home is going to last generations. And that's where that would be where you start, is where you do the work inside, do the work where you're in your environment, and use your voice where you can. So it starts there. And to be kind to yourself, and it's new, and love on yourself, be kind with yourself. And when you have moments where you feel like, why didn't I know this, or whatever it is that you may feel, knowing that there are people who support you through this transition as you begin to see things that hurt and not feel like you were educated about them. So I would say just start at home, because that's where generational things, and that's where a lot of the work will be done and will be long lasting.
That is so fantastic. I'm in such a beautiful, powerful way to close this out, because I think that that work is a part of all of the work, right? It's a part of the fact that we aren't supposed to grow up and be one-dimensional as adults. Like, the journey of learning is so inherent in what we are trying to advance with WISE, is that this being curious, it's not supposed to feel good all the time. And that's not, wellness and self-improvement isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to kind of be one really long journey of self-discovery at every different life stage and point. And as you raise little humans, or you become mentors, or your community grows and you educate other people in your community, if you being the change that you want to be, I think that that's so crucial as we're talking about, accountability for managing our own traumas too, and managing our own experiences, and being able to take that first step. And so I think that that's a really great way for us to close, and just take this opportunity and reflection. You all have been here the last 2 hours, which it flew by, and I didn't know how it was going to go. This is our first one that we have done, but this conversation is so powerful because we try to cover a lot of different things, and it's kind of a sampler, I think, of the discussions. I think this warrants additional conversations and going deeper in various topics. And so what I would welcome from all of the speakers is just like, I am so grateful for your time and your generosity for this community. But I also do think that, we would love to hear more about, the work that you're leading. And so as we share their platforms and how you can kind of follow them, I just really encourage you all to to just take a moment and think about the words that they've said tonight, let it reflect, and then share that back with us and let us know, and I will get that back to the speakers. You know, what did this bring up for you? And what are you going to do next to really invest in yourself or advocate for somebody else in your life? And I am just so encouraged by the attendance tonight and by all of you that have kind of hung into the end here. And I really look forward to continuing the dialogue and conversation with all of you. So thank you again, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week, and take care of yourself and get sleep. I think that's what we heard today, nature and sleep. Yeah.